If you carry a firearm and discharge your weapon in self-defense, you could face hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees and expenses. So carry the protection of CCW Safe, Self-Defense Legal Services membership. Upfront payment of all criminal and civil defense costs with no out-of-pocket for members.
And we are back. I'm Chris Evans, the CEO of Survival Dispatch, joined tonight by my good friend Jeff MD, 26-year CIA operative, author extraordinaire 007. And directly below Jeff is 008, Khalid Mohammed from Command 11 in Pakistan. Our boots on the ground, has a whole team in the Middle East. Lots of firsthand intel coming out of Khalid and his group. And directly below me, Team Carnivalt. Randy and I are both Team Carnivalt tonight. Get you some Carnivalt meat. Go to carnivalt.com. Use the coupon code EATMEAT, all one word, get 10% off. It's so good that when you stack it up for an emergency, it won't last. You'll eat it all in advance. Just like Randy and I, we've eaten every last bit of it. I talked to them earlier
at lunch.
I'm totally wiped out. I was talking to them earlier today. They said, we'll get another package out to you. I said, well, you better send a little bit more because you can't run a V8 on a gallon of gas. So anyway, and something else I want to mention every so often, our friends at Stay Brew Coffee, so staybrewed.com. So Craig he's like the sole man at home, 6 daughters and a wife, so 7 women, Craig. Yes. And one of his daughters always sends us a really nice handwritten letter, and they send us coffee. We don't get any affiliate money from them. We don't want any affiliate money from them. It's a solid Christian family and just super, super nice people. Go to staybrewed.com. And we used to have a coupon code. It was SD10. I don't know if it still works or not, but either way, go ahead and support him. He's doing awesome things in his small community. All right. So we got to get started with the conflicted question before we dive into tonight's topic, which is a doozy. It's actually going to be 2 parts tonight. So for the first part, we've got Jeff and Randy with us. And for the second part, Mike Glover will be joining us. So let's get the conflicted question up here. Boom, there we go. All right, so conflictedthegame.com. If you're not aware of this, it's a card game. There's multiple card decks. I want to say there's 14 card decks now. And these are all scenarios in a post-apocalyptic world or just before something happens to create a post-apocalyptic world. And there's an element of morality to every question. So I'm going to put this out right now. We want to see your answers in the live chat or comment sections. And Khalid, Mike Glover, and I will give you our answers at the end. And Jeff and Randy, if you all want to throw your answers in the live chat, by all means do that. So your hunting party has been captured by an unknown number of well-armed men and is being held in a well-fortified location. The armed men offer to return your hunting party for half of your food supply. Would you take their offer and avoid losing members of your group, or would you fight and risk everything? How would you handle this situation? So another doozy. I think this is deck number 2 out of the 14. And I got to tell you, like, the first 5 decks are super heavy on the morality front. There's some doozy questions in there for sure. So anyway, tonight we're going to be discussing power grid glitches, coordinated flash mobs, and false alarms, bomb threats, active shooter threats that don't exist, many of which have not been random. And Khalid's an absolute expert in this. They've been practice runs for terrorists who are fine-tuning their attack plans because it gives them the opportunity to measure what the response time is for first responders, what the SOPs are for the first responders, standard operating procedures, and it's pretty sneaky. So I'm going to tell you right now, we can't unequivocally pull up an individual event like a bomb threat and say 100% this is a terrorist, testing the system, but law of averages says it's a good chunk of them. So we've got a lot of data to show you, but we're going to get started right away with our first post here. So this is from Lieutenant Colonel Navdad Shoshani. Watch 5 armed terrorists operating within a vehicle marked with a fake World Center Kitchen emblem. Despite having no affiliation with the organization, they wore yellow vests and cynically exploited the trust given to aid groups to conceal their identity. So, in other words, we've been warning for quite some time that 9/11 2.0 will see terrorists disguised as first responders. And in this case, you've got the bad guys disguised as essentially an NGO. 40-second video. We don't have to watch the whole thing, but you'll get an idea of it. And I don't think that there's no audio with this, but this is obviously drone footage, and essentially they're armed terrorists, as you saw that just pop up there. More armed terrorists over here, but everybody in this area, in this region, is looking at them like, oh, here comes, the meal train, here comes the people with the food. And it doesn't turn out too good for them. So I'm actually going to stop that there, because as you can see, you've got some stuff blurred out here on a couple of the platforms we broadcast to, YouTube in particular. If you play all the way through these videos, terrorist videos, it's like an instant strike. So Jeff, I want to go to you first. This is not a new tactic. Yeah. The bad guys have done this for years. Give me your thoughts on what the average person can do if the shit hits the fan. How do they confirm whether or not somebody's a real first responder or not?
Yeah, it's difficult, but you've got to be. One thing you need to do before anything happens is, when you see a police officer, when you see a fireman, you see an EMT, look at what they're wearing. And you can't tell if someone's uniform is wrong unless you know what the right uniform looks like.
Good point.
So think about talking. When you see police officer on the street all the time, you see them in your neighborhoods. Pay attention. What kind of shoes do they wear? What kind of web gear do they have? Do they have belts? What do they have on the belts? Do they have? They almost all will have a small leather handcuff pouch on their belt, usually in the back. Now, would a terrorist have a handcuff belt? Yeah, probably not. No, pouch? Probably not. But yeah, you got to look at that. Where do they keep their extra magazines? What is the police department or sheriff's logo look like? Can you recognize it? Could you tell a real one from a fake one? What kind of headgear do they wear? You got to look at that. And then if someone comes up and they don't fit what then the hair on the back of your neck should go up.
Well, and you have to trust that. You have to trust your gut. There's so many instances, everybody who's had a brush with death and, lived to tell the story, almost every single one of them says it didn't feel right. Something didn't feel right, but they ignored their instincts. We're the only living beings on earth that do that. Cat sees a dog, cat runs away. They don't pause, sort of thing. Right. The only thing I have to add to yours, Jeff, and you really touched on it, is some instances of terrorists being disguised as first responders. I read, number one, that footwear didn't match. In other words, they were wearing their normal footwear, and it certainly didn't look like anything you would expect to see cops wearing. Another thing, just from myself, because I'm a radio geek, is that if somebody poses as a cop and they don't have a Motorola or a Kenwood or a Harris radio, and they've got something like a Chinese radio, like a Baofeng or a TID radio, that we don't use those radios. It's the first 3 brands that I mentioned is like 99% of the market. And the third thing is the badges. There's a lot of fake badges out there. I actually read, Jeff, there was a cop. I don't know if he commented on one of our videos or somebody else. It doesn't matter. But what he said was, as soon as he left his county, because he, have warrant for somebody, and somebody else would come with him from that jurisdiction. That's not always the case, but he made sure that there was always somebody with him, because people would say, well, this isn't your jurisdiction, or I don't recognize your badge, or whatever the case may be. So I just thought it was an interesting anecdotal example on that guy's part. So I'm going to pull up the next one for you, Khalid. This is way, way, way overdue. But check it out. We're finally making some progress. Secretary of State Marco Rubio announced Tuesday that the U.S. is in the process of designating the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist organization. Give me your thoughts on this. What looks like it's finally going to happen.
Well, this is something that should have happened back when Trump was president the first time. He started the process. He started the process to classify Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization, but his term ended before he was able to pass it. The State Department has got to push really hard for this, because you're going to get a lot of pushback from the Democrats. You're going to get a lot of pushback because they love the Muslim Brotherhood. And you're going to get a lot of pushback from some of the Middle Eastern countries that are investing in the U.S. Saudi's going to push back. Qatar's going to push back. Your real allies in the Middle East are going to support this decision, because 6 countries in the Middle East have already banned the Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization. You need to get that force together. You need the support from the Middle East. You also need that support here in the U.S. And part of being able to pass a bill like this is you need to educate the public. I mean, you need to Marco Rubio needs to sit down on TV and explain what the Muslim Brotherhood is. This is what they do. This is who they support. This is how they use the money. This is a threat to the United States. Once you get that understanding out to the people, then people start calling their congressmen, they'll start calling their senators and saying vote to declare this a terrorist organization. Because the biggest problem you have is that you've got so many liberals that are so proud of the Muslim Brotherhood, and they want Muslim Brotherhood and care and all these things to continue to operate. But until you get that people force behind this, it's not going to happen. It's kind of like with the defund Taliban push that was done. Sean Ryan did a show on it. He brought on Legend. He brought on Sarah Adams, and they talked about defunding the Taliban. And they did a series of programs on it, and people picked up on it. Once they picked up on it, the push started in Congress. That why are we paying the Taliban? Why are we paying the Taliban? Why are we paying the Taliban? Tim Burchett stepped in and he put a bill into the House of Representatives that now I think it's the 3rd month that it's pending in the Senate. It has not gone to a vote.
Right on. I appreciate that. So, Randy, we're going to stick with the Muslim Brotherhood, but check this out. This should be concerning to our friends in England. Muslim Brotherhood boot camps in the UK. What are they training for? 39 seconds. Different images and thoughts. So, Randy, what do you think they're training for? It's
Man,
not a trick question.
that was just like going down to the Y back in the day, right? No,
Something
these
like
people
that.
definitely have bad intentions. And this is about now they've already done the buildup, right? Now is the activation part. Now it's time to go time. And it's the same thing we've talked about many times. I mean, it's just kind of what happens, right? First you go in and you find out who everybody is, and then you build out a little network, and then sooner or later it's time to activate those folks and put them into action. And one of the last few things you're going to be doing is running through drills like this and stuff. Certainly if you know what you're doing and you want a higher probability of success, you're going to run some little trial runs, and get them prepared. You're going to teach them little light defense stuff, or whatever you're actually doing, either weapons or not. You're kind of training these folks up, and that's exactly what that looked like for me.
Same.
They were all men, all military age men, and and they were all looking like they were fairly physical fit. Certainly for most of the folks I saw, as far as Islamic kids that age, all the people in Iraq and Afghanistan didn't look like that.
Nope.
What kind of men leave a war-torn country and leave the women and children behind and just leave themselves? Because that's what we've seen here, and that's what Europe's seen, right?
Well, that's a one-way agent. What
military-aged men.
Yep.
Dude.
Yep.
So
yep.
It speaks for
you're working on physical strength, working on self-defense, and there is no telling what they're telling them in those little seminars we were just watching right there. That's where they're telling him, just like what we've talked about. This is where they start planting in their head, you're going to be a hero. This is what we're going to do. This is this huge movement. We're going to change the world.
Yep, exactly. So bringing up the next one, this is for you, Jeff, and we'll get into the main stuff. These are just some terrorism news updates. Tony Saruga, very high profile individual. Texas, what the F is going on? You're about to lose your state. First, the Muslim city, which was Epic City, which is still proceeding, by the way. Greg Abbott did nothing. All he did is make sure that they got their building permits. Now, Texas just made March the 23rd, Pakistan Day. Can anyone give a good explanation why? I hear Muslims are working on having Texas leaders slip in the Islam star into the design of the Texas state flag. Alert Texas, everyone is Muslim here. That's not a warning. It's a quote from a Muslim resident living in Irving, which Randy and I have spoken to a number of times. Governor Abbott says there's no Sharia in Texas, but take a drive through Plano or Irving and you'll see the truth. Islamic only parks and signage, Quran schools that reject Western education, streets named after Islamic figures, residents proudly declaring, this reminds me 100% of my Muslim country. Not a single dog seen or heard. This reminds me of my 100% Muslim country. Texas is the future. Everyone is Muslim here. We just walked to the, I can't pronounce that. That looks like it's probably, I'm guessing, Khalid, what is that, like a place of worship?
Yeah, that's the mosque. That's the mosque.
Okay. Okay. I'm not familiar with that spelling. This is the ideal life for Muslims. MashaAllah written on almost every house. Where else can you practice Islam like this in America? Well, Dearborn, Minneapolis. 3 Minnesota brothers are moving to Texas like no tomorrow. They make a community full of Muslim names. This is the American dream for Muslims. There's a long video here. I think it's, well, actually, that's a shorter one. This one here is 23 minutes long. I'm going to paste a link to this in the live chat while I pass it over to you, Jeff, for your comments on Texas in general. I mean, Texas goes down, America goes down. And that's why the Democrats, globalists, everybody's attacking Texas. You're on mute, Jeff.
Yeah, it's true. If Texas goes down, we're pretty well screwed. I think there are a lot of people in Texas who recognize this for what it is and are working to combat it. The problem you're going to run into is, they got a First Amendment right to practice their religion. And, if you can name a street after St. Michael, you can name a street after Muhammad. The problem is, it's not that these people are Muslim. It's not that these people are practicing Muslims. It's that these people are not assimilating at all into our culture. They don't recognize other people's right to hold differing views and have different religion. The whole problem with Islam is, as the political Islam people push it, is it's about dominance. It's not about assimilation. It's not about making their lives better. It's about controlling everybody else. And that's where the problem comes.
Well said. So our good friend, Lieutenant Colonel Doc Pete Chambers, posted this late yesterday. And there's a picture of Greg Abbott at the World Economic Forum with a representative from the World Economic Forum. And we've been saying this for a couple of years now. Greg Abbott is not who he seems to be. He's a globalist. He's in the back pocket of the World Economic Forum. He's a devout Klaus Schwab follower, even though Klaus Schwab been separated from the WEF now for apparently embezzling money. But I think Greg Abbott's in trouble here because Doc Pete has served at the highest levels in the state of Texas, and he's got the receipts on all of this stuff. You won't see this sort of picture from anywhere else but from Doc Pete. It'll be a shame if Doc Pete doesn't get elected. If he doesn't get elected, then God save Texas. All right, moving on to the next one for you.
Well, I was going to say real quick, Jim, didn't this how they started in Europe, though? If we look back, they started with just neighborhoods.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing videos, man, probably when I was still at SOCOM, and this was already happening in Europe. And there were videos of, if you were the white European or the people that are actually the natives there and try to drive through their neighborhood, these dudes would come running out of the woodwork to try to get at them. And, that, which is the problem with, and again, you're not supposed to be able to discriminate in any fashion when it comes to renting or selling property. And apparently they are. So I just want to point that out.
So the last piece of news goes to you, Khalid, and then we'll get into the main topics from your friend Sarah Adams. The deafening silence before the storm. Why hasn't Kristi Noem issued a National Terrorism Advisory System Bulletin, NTAS, for Al-Qaeda's upcoming U.S. homeland plot? The plotting, which is now well into the operational phase, began in 2022. AQAP released a video in December 2023 teasing the operation, and even recently the head of AQAP, Syed bin Atef Al-Awaki, was given a $20 million bounty. Guess why? Throughout 2024, we provided multiple detailed reports on the plot to the government, down to the names of operational ground commanders and details on the invisible bomb. A bomb FBI swept under the rug, never disseminating the specific details provided to them. In February 2025, we handed the new administration our entire investigation, and soon after, our best piece of physical evidence that proves a plot. Yet DHS's NTAS remains silent. No terrorism bulletin to states, no actionable guidance to communities and the public, no directives to the aviation industry for heightened security. TSA is not enabling our federal air marshals to win. They just took the right way to carry guns. Yeah. And it's a Biden appointee, by the way, which just blows my mind. But anyway, not enabling our federal marshals to win, and worse is loosening screening standards, including the ending requirement to remove shoes, even as Al-Qaeda's aviation plot moves fast forward with the real goal to take down a dozen airlines using suicide bombers, airliners, pardon me. Meanwhile, the CIA is actively and aggressively suppressing reporting that this plot is being directed by Al-Qaeda from Afghanistan under Taliban protection, because admitting it would expose their own compromised relationship with the Taliban. They're intentionally ignoring ground truth and life-saving facts to protect themselves, not the public. CIA Director Hecht, the New Age equivalent of 9/11's 20th hijacker, Faraj al-Hamasi, was caught in Germany ahead of the upcoming homeland plot, a development that should have been a huge counterterrorism win. Instead, has anything been done since his arrest to actually thwart it, or even his network here? No. This current failure falls squarely at the hands of the CIA. DHS and ODNI was created after 9/11 to prevent exactly this. Instead, the agencies responsible for warning the public are playing politics with security. States should be running drills. Communities should be reviewing emergency plans. Families should be training on stop the bleeding. Travelers should be informed and vigilant, but without a warning, not enough of that is happening. You don't wait until after the attack to start talking. You warn, you prepare, you protect. The American people deserve more than silence, and they deserve the truth. Wow. All right. So Sarah had a mouthful to say there. Khalid.
No, Sarah's fantastic. I mean, Sarah's been at this with the 9/11, with the Al-Qaeda plot for well over 2 years. And she has banged her head against the wall on trying to get the government to listen. When Biden was in office, nobody cared because it served their purpose to leave the borders open. We all believed that once Trump came to power, that we would see a change in national security. And what's ended up happening is everything's being swept under the rug. I mean, ever since this Trump administration has started, anything that looks like radical Islamic terrorism has been quieted. It's just been boom and gone. Even domestic terrorism, the Idaho shooter, the bombing in Palm Springs. Did you hear anything after it happened? The guy, the accomplice of the Palm Springs bomber who fled to Poland, was arrested in Poland, brought back to the U.S. Nothing was said after that. There have been so many incidents where we've all gone, wait a minute, what's going on? Why is there an active attempt to keep this thing quiet? You're focused on the cartels, which we understand, but the cartels cannot do the kind of damage that the terrorists can do. And you're not even paying attention to them. So Sarah was dead on. I mean, she was on fire this morning when she wrote this.
So Khalid, any idea on why this information is being suppressed, why it's not being shared with the public, why we're not seeing any proactive stuff?
The problem is that half of it is the government doesn't want to understand. I mean, you've got the wrong guy as the guy sitting on the National Security Council next to Trump. Seb Gorka is the wrong person to be sitting there. He has no battlefield experience. He has no understanding of terrorism from an upfront point of view. There are people who've actually seen terrorism, and there are people who have read about terrorism. There's a huge amount of space between the two things. Mm-hmm. Me not understanding terrorism would be my own stupidity, because I'm in a war zone. We have seen it. We've watched it happen. We've seen how many lives have been taken. We understand what terrorism looks like. So we're ringing the bell, but someone who's never been in the battlefield and understood this isn't going to be able to advise the president. The second problem is because of your relationship with the Taliban, the Taliban position that the administration has taken, marginalized Afghanistan position that you've taken, trust what the Taliban's giving you in terms of intelligence. How can you give credible intelligence? The Taliban's not going to tell you the truth.
Right. So I'm just going to go back to Jeff and then Randy. I want to hear y'all's input on what motive would there be to suppress this information, or is it not a motive and it's just incompetence?
Well, I think a lot of it is, to a certain extent, laziness. You know, it's a big problem. It's a hard problem, and I don't want to do it, and I'll just ignore it, and maybe somebody else will do it. Or if I ignore it, it'll go away. I really think there's a lot of people out there who, you know, they think that if they just ignore it, it'll go away. Or when it does happen, it's going to be such a big deal. There's going to be so much blame to go around. No one's going to be able to point a finger at them specifically. But, you know, I equate it to the cop who's sitting on the street corner, and, you know, he sees a guy selling weed 20 feet away, but he didn't want to fill out the paperwork, so he didn't arrest him. Yeah. You know, there's a certain amount of, yeah, I'll deal with it later. Or it's not their pet project. Maybe they're focused on the cartels and they'll let somebody else do that. But you need somebody up high to say, no, get off your ass and do this, or you're fired.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to be happening. Randy, I want to hear your thoughts on this too.
Yeah, I was thinking along the lines of, you know, we also have to realize there's still a lot of people in all the federal agencies, I'm not saying all of them, you know, we don't know what the number is, but there's still a lot of people that don't like Trump and would love to see him fail for any reason. And so, you know, and then certainly we know the people that are against him, the actual folks that are in charge of all this, anybody that they have control of, let's say anybody that they have information on for whatever reason, they're going to tell them how they're going to act, whether they're going to continue. And then you got to realize those advisors are then probably advising the president. Well, it's really not that big of a deal. That's what I think it probably is. But, you know, we're all just speculating. You know, we don't really know what the reason is, because you would think this is a pretty serious deal that people would pay attention to it. And we've been hit before, you know, so I wish it was different, but it just looks like that, they're just hoping it'll go away.
It does to a certain extent.
Or that it happens and they can blame it on Trump at the end of the day.
Yeah, but can I add something? I mean, this isn't 2001. I mean, this isn't just your mainstream media. You've got social media full of reports on this. I mean, Sarah's done podcasts. We've done podcasts. The number of reports that have been written on this. You cannot go hide in a hole and say, we didn't know. You can't blame Trump and say, we didn't know. We have beaten this thing into everybody. Everybody we've beaten this into, that this attack is coming. This attack is coming. So the idea of trying to blame Trump for it, okay, Trump didn't take action, but did anybody tell him that this was going to happen? Did anyone give him that briefing that, you know, that this threat is real? It's not hocus pocus. It's not a figment of our imagination. And my worry is that people are trying to handcuff Trump, but Donald Trump is not an idiot. He listens to everyone who hears him, that tells him something, and then he asks his advisors, and then if the advisor turns, oh, it's not real, don't worry about it, nothing's going to happen. I mean, just this hospital threat alone, the FBI literally called it, said it wasn't a credible threat.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. So just a quick comment. I saw some stuff go by in the comments here. We see comments from all 9 platforms that we're broadcasting out of, so it goes by faster for us than it does for y'all on one platform. But somebody made a comment about a 10-7 scenario, here in America. While that is possible, that's not what the intelligence is indicating. Now, there is the Burning Man festival, August 24th to September 1st, 75,000 people. It's possible there could be an attack there, but you can see Khalid shaking his head, because Khalid has his guys have firsthand intel on the ground, have infiltrated certain groups, let's say, without saying too much more, that what we're looking at are complex coordinated attacks like Mumbai in 2008 and Paris in 2015. So essentially what that means in high level terms, and I'll go to Khalid in just a second to put the finishing touches on it. But basically what's going to happen, you've got 10 to 15 tier 2 cities that have one level 1 trauma center. ISIS are the guys boots on the ground as far as attacking things like schools, office buildings, churches, those sort of things, retail locations at the beginning when things kick off. Then when first responders go to whatever, targets hit first, Al-Qaeda lights up and goes to the local airport and starts hijacking planes, because there's no law enforcement response other than the on-prem security. And at the end of the day, ISIS ends up taking that level 1 trauma center, gets entrenched, that's their headquarters, and they proceed to use it to broadcast videos of maiming, torturing, and killing Americans until we do something about it. But at the end of the day, there's only a couple choices. We either bomb the building or we send in commandos. Either way, you're looking at massive casualties. And if we send in commandos, there's a high probability, because there's solid intel, that they'll release vaporized sarin into the HVAC system, just like the FSB did in Russia in 2002 during the Chechen rebel hostage scene. But they used aerosolized carfentanil, which is 100 times more powerful than the base analog of fentanyl. Khalid, am I missing anything as far as what the intel says for this complex coordinated threat?
You got the whole thing. I mean, this is nothing like what 9/11 was. This is 9/11 in 2 or 3 different stages. And the buildup and the first attack and everything that's going to happen, it is going to knock America so far backwards from a psychological point of view, that this kind of attack happened on our soil. And the reason we keep talking about it is because we don't want the attack to happen. We want people to start getting active. We want people to start getting ready. Start complaining to your senators, start complaining to your congressman that, listen, people are talking about this attack. Why are you making moves like taking away weapons from your air marshals? Why are you doing stupid things like that? I mean, you're weakening your own defenses.
Yeah, it's straight up insanity. But anyways, let's get into the heart of the matter here. So the main topic of the night is, power grid glitches that aren't really glitches. These are, planned outages that are being perpetrated by our enemies. Coordinated flash mobs. We've seen this happen. It just happened recently in LA, for example. It's been happening in Washington the past couple nights. There's more to that than meets the eye. It's not just George Soros paying people to go and protest. It's the intelligence that's gained by deploying these flash mobs. What's the response from the cops? How long does it take them to respond? And that gives them all the information they want and need when they attack us, sort of thing. False alarms, bomb threats, and active shooters, they're harder to, basically say, yeah, for sure, this is a terrorist group. But there's been so many of them that for sure many of them are terrorist groups. So think of all this stuff as like practice runs for terrorists, fine-tuning their attack plan. So let's talk power grid right off the bat. And we're going to spend a bit of time on power grid. So we're a first world country with a third world power grid. We have 55,000 substations across the country. We have 3 grids, East, West, and Texas. Most of the time, they are not connected to each other. Occasionally, Texas might connect to the West grid to send California some power because they closed down all their fossil fuel burning plants as far as electricity is concerned. So 55,000 transformer or substations, 3 per grid, so 9 total. If you take those 9 out, you take power out to 95% of America. In other words, anybody who's not right beside the power station ends up losing their power. You've got the Chinese have bragged about this, saying they have access to 24 of our networks. You have this Volt Typhoon hacking group. These are black hats. So the CCP is proud to say that it's one of their groups, and they don't disguise it. They don't hide it when they're speaking to people outside of America. There's rumors as well that North Korea and Iran are part of Volt Typhoon. Whether they are or not is secondary to the fact that they've all admitted to working together, because the enemy of my enemy is a friend of mine. And our power grid is extremely vulnerable. We have nothing in place for EMP protections. We have no physical security to speak of. I mean, you can ask Khalid, I dug deep on this, and I pulled up over 3,000 instances filed for power grid companies on attacks or outages, vandalism, all kinds of stuff from 2010 to 2023. The data for 2024 hasn't been released yet. And I'm actually going to show that spreadsheet so you can get your head wrapped around the size of it. But what's also hidden in there that nobody's been talking about is the physical attacks. Those transformers are full of mineral oil. Typically, it's a cooling agent. It's 1/8-inch mild steel, by the way. So a 223, 556 AR will easily penetrate it, which is what happened in North Carolina a couple years ago, just before Christmas. A couple good old boys shot up the transformers. The oil leaked out, overheated, poof, took the entire substation down. They actually had to wire that grid into the grid beside them and then have limited amount of power. 48-month wait time to get transformers. So I've said a mouthful there, and I want to pass it over to you first, Jeff, because you're the engineer amongst us. If we have attacks on our power grid, what's worst case scenario? What's best case scenario in your opinion?
Well, the worst case scenario is that you have a cascading failure. It takes down all the grids. And one of the issues is if the grids are linked, can they decouple quick enough? And that's going to be hard to do if somebody's inside your SCADA system. Normally, the SCADA system might do it itself, or you can just push a button, send a command, boom, it does it. But if someone's got your SCADA system, it's like trying to drive a car, but you can't grab the steering wheel.
So I'm familiar with the acronym, but for people who aren't familiar with what a SCADA system is,
SCADA is was it called System Command and Data Acquisition System? What it does is it's a computer network. Supervisory controlled data acquisition is what it stands for, and it can control any kind of a system or network. Pipelines run on SCADAs. Water systems run on SCADAs. Refineries, oil refineries, big complex systems like that run on SCADAs. There's a computer that monitors all the aspects of it, and make sure that everything is in sync and in perfect harmony. Very, very popular. It's kind of started with the electric grid, because it used to be you'd have to have a guy go out physically and throw a switch if you had to shut down a line. And that might take 20 minutes, might even take an hour, depending on where the switch is. Well, now they're all automated, and they can do it with the push of a button. But that requires all those switches and all those things being linked via either a radio net, satellites, or the internet. Most of it's via the internet. If something's on the internet, it can be hacked.
100%. There's no such thing as an infallible system. So the next one for you, Khalid, and there's a reason we're going one at a time to everybody, because we've got a ton of stuff to cover tonight, and I want to make sure we get it all squeezed in before Jeff and Randy depart at the 1 hour mark and Mike Glover comes in. So there are stories going back actually 25 years ago, news reports that are easy to find, easy to pull up. This one here was 2015, December 22nd, 2015. And I have a couple more regarding Iran, but I pulled this up just to show y'all that this isn't something new as far as Iran hacking into our systems, especially our power grids. And because they're in your backyard, Khalid, I wanted to go to you on the Iranian stuff. So by the way, this equipment here is a 48-month lead time, as I mentioned before. Most of it comes from Germany, some of it Southeast Asia. But if these guys are successful in physically damaging the grid, not just turning it off, we will actually go back to the 1800s. So I'll turn it over to you, Khalid, for your thoughts on Iran, because Iran's basically the biggest state sponsor of terrorism in the world.
Yeah. Well, back in 2015, Iran was very immature. They did their cyber hackers weren't fantastic. They could only do certain levels of certain kinds of activities. What we've seen, and if you look at with the war, the 12-day war with Israel, what Iran was able to do in terms of pulling intelligence out of Israeli servers. The other day, we saw a video that Iran put together where they literally, not only the pilot's picture, her husband, her children, where she went to school, what her birthday was, all of it was put out on the web. So, I mean, the level that Iran has gotten to now is just unreal. But you have to understand, it's not just Iran. Iran has China, Iran has North Korea, Iran has Russia. All three are working together. And when all three start working together, you are talking about a very powerful force. The Russians have been very good at cyber attacks for a very long time.
Yep.
When they start training the Iranians, you go to a different level.
So before I go to Randy with the next story, Khalid, how would it work with Iran having access to our power grid while groups like AQ, ISIS, and whatnot are attacking us here in the homeland? What level of coordination is there between all these bad guys?
Well, the way we've heard the chatter inside the camps is that IS, Islamic State, will attack all of the soft targets, the soft underbelly of the U.S. They'll give it a day and a half, and then cyber attacks will start and infrastructure attacks will start. Now, once those infrastructure attacks start, you cause mass pandemonium, because once you start losing power, you start losing cell network, you start losing communications. All of a sudden, people start to freak out, and there's no other way to describe it. People start to freak out. Once you freak out, you've created the chaos that you want, and people will flood out onto the streets. Once they flood out on the streets, you're open targets.
So let me just understand this correctly, Khalid. So basically, you've got ISIS kicks things off in 10 to 15 tier 2 cities, schools, office buildings, retail, churches, before going for the trauma center. And sometime that night or the next day, their partners, the Iranians, turn off power grids. So the word's got out that we've been attacked, but now nobody has comms or power is essentially what you're saying.
Yeah, because the intent is you want to give enough time that the message spreads across the entire world that the U.S. has been attacked. Now, once that message is spread, then you shut down the power system. Once the power system is shut down, then a fear lifts in the U.S. And once that fear lifts, people who still have a little bit of connectivity, maybe have generators, solar power, and still can function, they're passing this information out on X, out on other platforms, and the fear grips the U.S. Once the fear grips the U.S., that spreads across, not just across the U.S., but into Europe as well. And then Europe goes into a shutdown. And a lot of this we've already seen in Europe. We've seen the power grid shutdowns. We've seen the cell network shutdowns. ATMs stop working. You can't pull any money out of the bank. Credit cards don't work anymore. You can't buy anything. It is a ripple effect. And that ripple effect, when it starts, it just creates more and more pandemonium. And that's what they're counting on, is creating that fear and playing on that fear.
Yeah, I can see how that would work. So, Randy, before I pull the next article up, I know you've mentioned this in the past, but if you could do it again, I'd appreciate it. Describe what happened when Baghdad fell, essentially.
Well, it's, I the term I always use, because the moment that we freed and it was like said it's over and we took Baghdad, literally that very next day, there was a level of looting that can only be described as biblical. And no one here in the United States has seen anything like this, I can promise you, because Baghdad has 8-10 million people. It's a lot. It's not as big as New York City, but man, it is pretty close.
Yeah.
So, and it looked like an anthill had come alive and was just eating everything on. There were, everybody was out everywhere, every vehicle, every cart and donkey, people walking, pulling carts, you name it. And they were stealing everything. And it was for 3 solid days until we had the orders to stop it. But, that's what happens when society collapses and it's a free for all. That's exactly what will happen. And then once the looting ended, which we stopped it, I don't know how, it could have went on for 2 or 3 more days, but eventually, no matter what, then the criminals come out. And certainly your criminals that have any kind of power, like they already have a network, they already have money and resources and weapons, and they go out and take over sections. They'll be out on the freeway stopping people, robbing them of every single thing they had, raping and killing them and everything else. And that started right after that. And that is, even with us having a standing army there, that was still very hard to deal with and to stop them. They were still able to do that even with us there. So you can imagine here in one of our big cities, or even a relative like even here in Dallas, it would be a nightmare. And there was nobody to stop them at that point.
Well, just add to that, and people have heard me say this before, we're never more than 3 missed meals away from anarchy.
Yeah.
Grocery stores typically have an average of 3 days worth of food on the shelf. A certain product drops to a quantity level. The ERP system, enterprise resource planning system, kicks out everything, kicks out the PO, the bill of lading to all the different parties involved in the supply chain. So when the grocery stores get raided and there's nothing left in the grocery stores and there's no supply chain because nobody's going to work, that's when things get really hairy. Because
you can't even pump gas without electricity, right? So even the pumps, we're low, you ain't gonna have gas. You've got a tank of gas and that's it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's interesting you mentioned that, Randy, because I know a number of people. So Todd Savage from Survival Retreat Consulting, I think, was the first person who told me this. He deals with higher net worth individuals. And when people ask him, where's a good location? He said, make sure that you're at least a tank and a half of fuel away from any major city.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's
for
good.
The reason you just
because
mentioned.
the masses are coming and they only get so far on that tank of gas.
Correct.
So
correct.
be well outside that zone, you should be good.
So actually, just because we stuck on that one for a minute, I'm going to go to Jeff on this. So Bill Daley, a former FBI investigator, this is on Fox News, by the way, who worked to thwart terror attacks and dealt with foreign counterintelligence, told Fox News Digital that while hard infrastructure like rail lines and power plants could be at risk, cybersecurity should be a key focus. You also look at things such as power plants, utilities, that type of infrastructure, where if they were able to put a concentrated effort towards a cyber attack, you could diminish the electrical grids and other kinds of technical infrastructure, Daley said. We know they've looked at ways to try and get into our infrastructure or control the water resources, water systems, the electrical grid. Like, it goes well beyond just grids. So, Jeff, question for you. What communication systems remain available and secure when the cell network and internet are essentially taken down?
Probably, Inmarsat, Starlink, some satellite based. And what you need is a direct to you satellite base. You can't be one where you call in and it goes out over a satellite. It's got to go direct to your hands, from your handset to a satellite to somebody else's handset.
Keep talking.
And what people don't seem to also realize is if you take down the grid, they probably do realize it, but you think about it. If you take down the grid, okay, you're gonna lose water. Okay, just what's in the tanks, because there'll be no electricity to run the pumps to refill the tanks. If you're fortunate enough to live in an area that they're using groundwater, if there's a sewage treatment, if there's a water treatment plant, it's going to go down because you're not going to have electricity for that, and it's only going to work until they run out of chlorine gas to basically sanitize the water. If people think, well, it's okay, I've got natural gas. Okay, how long is your natural gas going to last if they don't have pumps to move it? It goes in pipelines, and those pipelines, a lot of them are over pumped. They're pumped up, and they actually use the pipeline itself as a storage tank. But when that runs out, there's no, they use turbines to move the gas and to pump up those pipelines. Well, the turbines run on electricity.
That's right.
All the subsystems, the telephone, it used to be in the old days, there were huge, massive banks of batteries in the bottom of every telephone switching system. That's why phones worked when the power went off. There were these humongous lead acid batteries the size of a house underneath there, and that kept the system energized. Yeah. They don't use those anymore. They're not compatible with the electronic and the TDMA, CDMA, and the switching and everything that's required. They certainly don't work with cell phones. Cell phones, you got people who don't think about it. Okay, yeah, you're calling the tower, but the tower hooks into a landline system, usually fiber optic, and it goes somewhere else. No electricity, that fiber optic's not energized. So you can talk to the tower and you can't talk anywhere else. And that's only as long as the generators for the tower stay running. Most of them have backup generators, but they only have a limited amount of fuel. So everything's going to collapse because everything runs on electricity.
Yeah.
I defy you to find any major system in this country that does not.
You know, and
So-
provide that does happen, or if they take out all the satellites, because you may not have, it could happen if there was some sort of attack that China said they would take out all of our satellites at once. So if that happens, or they turn us off from us, right?
There's 10,000 Starlink satellites all over the world. There's
That's
no way
pretty
they take
crazy.
all those out.
So you don't think that'll ever happen where all of a sudden you can't connect to satellites?
Well, the big satellites, the geosynchronous and things like that, they can take out.
Well, my point is the shortwave radio, and they do have those that are hand cranked. So it doesn't take, if worst case scenario, if you have a shortwave with a hand crank, you don't have to have batteries, you don't have to plug it in. And that was kind of what I was getting to. So
or if you have a ham radio and you've got a solar battery.
Yeah, that's right.
You can talk.
That's right.
Yeah. So just a handful of things I've written down here. Number one, we have visual intelligence of Chinese satellites wargaming against each other. And China's made no secret of the fact that if we end up into war with them, that our Achilles heel is our munitions being guided by satellite GPS units. We have other systems.
Yeah.
That's the primary thing. So a lot of the missiles that were given to Ukraine that should have never gone there, that were then directed at Russia, Ukraine did not have the ability to do that. Our military had to do the guidance for them through the satellite system. So the other part to it is that this is probably the cheapest way to get satellite communication. So this is the Garmin InReach Mini 2. I want to say they're like $390 on Amazon these days. $12 a month, but you can pause your subscription, turn it back on. You can tether your smartphone to this. So you can send and receive text messages over the satellite network. You can pull down extremely detailed topographical maps. It's a really decent little guy. We've been in some really off the grid locations in the Blue Ridge Mountains where we lost cell phone service, drove for another hour, had no cell phone service. And this was the only thing that we had that was capable of reaching out to the world until we drove an hour back the other way and reconnected. The other thing I want to briefly mention here as well is that for the past 30 years, both parties have had proposals in front of them to harden the grid against physical attacks, logical network attacks, EMPs, all that kind of stuff. Donald Trump was the last one to do it in his first term, and it was going to cost $5 billion, and we still haven't done it. So again, we're a first world country with a third world power grid, and it's weak. Just to say, there's no other way to put it. It's weak. So
hey, Chris, you don't have a link to that little radio on those two products. Somebody's asking if you would drop
on the Garmin.
Yeah. And the other, is it on the site? Yeah.
Yeah, Garmin InReach Mini 2. You can find it on Garmin's website or Amazon. So I'll find a link in just a second. We're going to move on to the next one here for Khalid, and then we'll wrap up with you and Randy after that. So next one up, I've got some very specific Iranian questions here for you, Khalid. So Iran hacks into U.S. power grid, and what they stole should frighten you. And this is fairly recent, by the way. So Iranian hackers have successfully penetrated America's power grid and accessed passwords and engineering drawings of power plants. And security experts say it's only a matter of time before such an attack leads to widespread blackouts. In fact, hackers from Iran and other countries such as China and Russia have infiltrated America's power grid at least a dozen times over the past decade. I actually have evidence that I'm going to show you tonight where the reports made to the feds on problems with power grids shows there's been many more than that. So they gain enough remote control to the operations network. They control basically the entire grid that's connected to each one of these centers. So if the geopolitical situation changes, Iran wants to target these facilities. If they have this kind of information, it'll make it a whole lot easier as far as tactical on the ground stuff is concerned, kinetic stuff on the ground. And what part of this means as well is that when they have usernames and passwords and nobody knows that that's been compromised, they've got so many boots on the ground here, right? Well, what did J.J. Carroll say? 200,000 special interest aliens. In other words, terrorists that Joe Biden let into the country and may
The ones we know about.
That's what we know of. 200,000 known terrorists. SIA is just a stupid acronym for them. So, Khalid, question for you. I had it up here. Just let me find it here. So all the data that they stole, Khalid, how does that make the physical attacks on infrastructure easier for them to perpetuate, or for their cells here to perpetuate against us?
Oh, it's a cakewalk now. I mean, really, it's a cakewalk. You've got the username, you've got the password, you connect to the grid, you put in a username and password, you shut off the grid.
Yep.
And it's not even traceable, because if you don't know whose username and password has been compromised, you're not changing the information. So you're still using the same thing. And so many of us, and please, those of you who have internet accounts that have really easy to guess passwords, change them. Anyone who's on an infrastructure grid someplace, change your password, just as safety precautions, because the fact that this information is out there, they've got your blueprints, they've got your usernames, they've got your passwords, they've got the IP addresses. They connect in, they pop in a username and password, and they shut down the grid. And slowly they can literally do a rolling blackout, where they can start from New York, from New Hampshire, and just start rolling the blackout through the entire US. And anywhere there's an attack going on, they can shut down the power. This could even happen before the attack happens, that they could shut down the power, have the attack happen, turn the power back on, let it run for a day, and then shut it off again. And we've seen numerous cases. I mean, we've tracked ever since middle of 2024, the number of cyber attacks on hospitals, on businesses, on electricity grids, on police stations. I sent you, Chris, I sent you a screenshot today that they shut down 4 nuclear reactors in Paris last night. 4 nuclear reactors in Paris last night. I mean, just think about the level these guys have gotten to, and what they could, the kind of damage they can do. I'm not trying to, put a fear into anyone, but when you start thinking about the level that your enemy has reached, they are ready to shut you down from every level. And once they shut you down, they know what your reaction is going to be. It's just like Randy said, you're going to start looting. You're going to be looking for food. You're going to be looking for gas. You're going to be looking for whatever you can get your hands on. And that's where they want to get you to. So Iran, China, Russia, it's golden opportunity for them.
Yeah, I'd say so. So Randy and Jeff, final thoughts before you all leave. I see Mike's backstage right now, but final thoughts on the power grid vulnerabilities that we're facing. Randy first.
Well, I've said it all along. We've had this credible intelligence for a long time. They've been telling us for 2 years that there was an attack coming. And the fact that we have done nothing about it. So I'm in the opinion now, we need to stop calling them our leaders, right? They're our elected officials. They're no longer leading us. This is not what leadership looks like. And you just have to wonder, how can that be?
Elected or installed?
That's or installed. That's correct.
Installed is better.
Because as Clee just pointed out, we're no different, right? That wasn't a Baghdad thing. That wasn't an Iraqi thing. That's a human nature thing. And so if they are able to pull off this type of attack and they even get it halfway through, we're going to see that on some level.
Agreed. Jeff, parting words?
Yeah, I think what we need to do is treat our grid with the same or with more,
sense of urgency.
Yeah, I know, but we got to be more serious about it. I mean, look, we invested hundreds of millions of dollars in a mine in California for rare earth minerals because the military needs rare earths. Well, everybody needs electricity. The government should be, and if I hate the idea of a government funded business, or maybe have the government like we do with our missile factories. They're run by Raytheon, but they're owned by the United States Air Force. Maybe the Department of Energy should build a factory that makes transformers, heaven forbid, and then what you do is you give a contract to Westinghouse or GE or somebody to maybe operate it. But the factory itself belongs to the United States government. So if GE screws up, then you take the contract away from them and give it to someone else. But if GE goes out of business, you don't lose your factory. You still own the factory. And we
Right.
do that with munitions plants. We do that with a lot of things, where we build complex systems for the military. They are run by the private sector, but they are owned by the Air Force.
We did it in World War II, highly
Our national
successful.
labs are like that. They're run by somebody else, but they're owned by the Department of Energy.
Isn't federal ammunition in that type of a model?
Yeah, you look at there's the big plant in Arkansas where they make just a boatload of small arms ammunition, but it's owned. I believe it's owned by the Army.
Yeah, or DOD somewhere in the mix. But
Yeah.
Anyway, we've got Mike backstage. Randy, Jeff, appreciate y'all. We'll see you back tomorrow night.
Okay,
Everybody
see you
else,
guys.
Yep.
everybody else hang out. We're just getting ready to move into the next phase here. Mike, how you doing?
Good. How are you guys?
Hey,
Living the
Mike.
dream. Appreciate you joining us, Mike.
Yeah,
I
thanks
got a
for having me
question for you, but just because I just caught this in the chat, so I don't know anything about it other than this. Apparently, there's an active shooter situation. Him on stage, active shooter situation going on in PA right now. Active shooter situation. Multiple officers have been shot west of Gretna in Pennsylvania County. So not Pennsylvania State, Pennsylvania County, pardon me. Virginia mass emergency response ongoing. No word if they know who the shooter is at this time. Story is developing. Did you have a chance to hear anything about this, Mike? This is the first I've heard about it. It was one of the
No,
people.
this is the first I've ever heard of it.
Okay. Yeah, it sounds like it happened maybe 30 minutes ago or so. So the people who put it in the live chat, appreciate that. If you see more stuff breaking on this, please drop it into the chat and we'll bring it up on screen. So, Mike, we're in the midst of discussing the fact that we're a first world country with a third world power grid. And we've already walked through Volt Typhoon, which is the CCP hacking group that's bragged that they've had access to all of our systems, not just the grid. We've discussed Iran also having that type of access, on top of which they also stole a huge amount of credentials and passwords for power stations and utility companies. And they've been doing this for years, but that was relatively recent as far as thefts are concerned. But then we throw in, Kim Jong-un, who's made threats to hit us with an EMP, and that's a whole lot easier said than done. But I'll just go through the beginning of this article, and I've got a couple questions for both of you. So, concerns over U.S. grid security rise as North Korea threatens EMP attack. For more than 15 years, security and intelligence officials, including former CIA Director James Woolsey, have been raising the alarm about the vulnerability of the U.S. power grid to an electromagnetic pulse attack. Only now, as tensions with North Korea quickly escalate, with the rogue nation refusing to back down from its nuclear testing and threats of such an onslaught, is the matter really generating attention. According to U.S. defense and security officials, while there are players purporting to protect the nation's critical infrastructure, given millions of American lives on the line, the reality is that no one really knows what will happen and what can be done. We recognize that an EMP event would have extremely dire consequences for the entire country, but where the challenge comes from is attempting to quantify those impacts. So, Mike, I mean, being a survival expert, prepping, your thoughts on the possibility of them even being able to hit us with an EMP?
Yeah, it's something that I've done a lot of studying up on. I also worked with DITRA, an organization that focuses its attention in weapons of mass destruction, including the potential fallout of a dirty bomb with an EMP component. An EMP is a relatively new idea in the world of counterterrorism, but it's not new to the United States because we led the testing on it in the 1950s, and it was kind of an accident. I mean, it was literally an accident when we realized that part of the electromagnetic pulse of a nuclear detonation in the atmosphere could cause a whole bunch of issues with electronic devices, surging obviously a magnetic range, and frying that through that surge in every electronic device that's powered. including the generators and the systems that power the electronic devices, right? So it's the old infrastructure that we operate under, which is like the transformer that you grew up. I grew up playing on transformers, not the robot, but the little green boxes, where every kid in every apartment complex I grew up in was around those things. But what we didn't realize is, one, that would kill you really quickly, but two, just that little box was what was disseminating the power from the grid to everything in existence. So the scary thing is, atmospherically, if they ever got one up in the air, it would obviously radiate and cause a whole bunch of issues. The thing that I think about in the biggest danger is, one, power is like, okay, got it. Power is going to be potentially out. But what about vehicles? Every single modern vehicle operates using several electronic computers, ECUs, PCUs, that if fried would render your vehicle useless. My Ford F-350, which is a beautiful truck, it's really reliable. If I don't have DEF fluid in that truck, then the truck goes in limp mode and shuts down on the side of the road as a big $75,000 brick. So you take that and you take this atmospheric pulse that destroys electronics, your computers, your internet, your power, your vehicles are completely inoperable. You take every high-speed utility that's delivering, whether it's a train to a Tesla Cybertruck, like a semi-truck, everything would be shut down. So not only do you not have power, but you don't have the logistical train providing the supplies to provide you the survival means in your area. And that's a huge concern. And I think we downplay it a lot because it hasn't happened. But it's a huge vulnerability in national security, but I think at the local level as well. It's why I advertise and always compel people to get EMP-proof things in their homes, in their vehicles, that aren't dependent on those electrical systems, so they have something if crap hits the fan.
Yeah, that's good. I just want to show a diagram of what's called a high altitude EMP. So when you detonate a nuclear warhead, as long as it has enough weight behind it, power behind it at a high elevation, it spreads out like this diagram shows here. So that as you get further away from the blast center, the strength, the impact of that EMP decreases. But this is typically something where you would detonate high altitude nukes. And I read somewhere way back when, I don't know if the number's current at all, but not only does Russia have the biggest nuclear stockpile now, whether or not it's functional or not is a whole other argument, but they have quite a few that are made to be detonated between 30 and 60,000 feet high, supposedly for this very particular reason right here. So back to you, Mike, and then to you after that, Clete. Recommendations for communications for people if we were to get hit with an EMP or multiple EMPs?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, what we know is the cell phone infrastructure, both CDMA and GSM, is not EMP proof. So the towers would be knocked out immediately. The electricity that provides the power to the tower will be knocked out immediately. So having a base level of GMRS and ham radio communications is super important. And just broadly speaking, most places in the country have ham radio clubs, which have relay stations. Those relay stations hop the feed to allow you to extend your range. Those aren't particularly EMP proof, but most of them operate off solar power. It doesn't take a lot of power or amperage and volts to be able to drive that signal and hop it. Meaning you'll have with your handheld ham radio, whether it's, I mean, ham radio guys would kill me for recommending a Baofeng because it's made in China. Yaesu is the preferred radio because it's made in Japan, high quality. But either way, if you get a ham radio, you're going to at least be able to listen to communications that are being transmitted. You could scan, and then you could talk, push to talk, person to person, likely line of sight. Just last caveat, remember, like, the nuclear explosion that we dropped in Japan, we dropped 2 of them. One of the bombs, the focal point of the bomb was approximately 700 meters. That's where the main damage was done, which doesn't sound like a big range. Outside of that bubble is about 1.6 kilometers was the second range. Everything obviously was eviscerated in that. But beyond that for miles was the fallout. So everybody who wasn't killed in the immediate area was killed because of the fallout. 80,000 plus people in one specific bomb. So when you think about that, a lot of people confuse EMP with concussive blast or the center of a nuclear bomb. So they say, well, it's going to be a part of a nuke. No, it could be an airburst EMP exclusive, where it's just radiating an EMP electromagnetic pulse, meaning you might not even feel a concussive blast, and it's going to destroy everything in the area. And that graphic you showed is a great illustration of just, you can have a focal point, but all the fallout is going to destroy the infrastructure for miles and miles to go.
Yeah, we ran a simulation with Mike Sterling a couple of years ago where the hypothesis of the scenario was a Russian sub off the coast of Jacksonville, where we've got a naval base and a Coast Guard base as well, Maytown. And when Mike put it all together, he detonated the nuke 100 feet off the ground, and a 50 kiloton nuke, only 100 feet off the ground, basically everything within 150-mile radius was destroyed electronically. So it would have hit us down here in Central Florida. And that 50 kilotons is not a massive warhead, and 100 feet is not a high altitude, EMP at all. It was really
just because everybody remembers this, the weather balloon from China that flew across our country, transcontinental, from northwest to southeast, basically up the coast of South Carolina. That weather balloon, we did the numbers on the elevation. If an EMP was detonated from that, half the country would have lost power.
Yeah. Phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. Khalid, do you want to add anything on the EMP stuff before we move on?
Mike covered everything. Mike covered everything from top to bottom.
All right. So I do have one thing for this, because as far as I know, we're the only people who've done this. That's according to EMP Shield, by the way. So we built this is our website, not our Substack, our website. Our Substack is survivaldispatch.news. This is survivaldispatch.com. And if you scroll down, you'll see this video here, EMP protection, 360,000 volt EMP shield test. It was actually way over 400,000 volts. And what we did is we took products from empshield.com. They're based out of Kansas. They manufacture approximately 5,000 of these a month, and they can't keep them in stock. Our military has them in all sorts of locations now. Proprietary technology inside of these things. You can connect them to your house. You can connect them to your vehicle. They're about $400 on average. Some are a little bit more, some a little bit less. But what's inside of them is a product called a metal oxide varistor, and it has infinite resistance until it senses high voltage. Then it has infinite attraction. I'm going to show you just a little snippet of that video and explain how we made this work. So I'm going to pause it here. So what this is a 20,000 volt transformer. And behind it here, these black blocks are 20,000 volt capacitors. So what we did is we sent 20,000 volts to all 20 capacitors, which technically would be 400,000 volts. We put 360 because in the absolute worst case scenario, if you had particulates in the air and high humidity, it might reduce it to that. But you're going to watch this. We jumped a gap of 20 centimeters, and typically it takes 30,000 volts to traverse 1 centimeter. So it would math out to be 600,000, but we're calling it 400,000. So this just shows the transformer generating 10,000 on one side and close to 10,000 the other side.
Oh, I don't see the video, Chris. Is it up?
Oh, shoot. Thank you. This is why we need a producer. You never ever trust the guy who only has vision in one eye to do stuff like this. I don't know who made that call, but shame on them. My apologies. All right, let's back this up quickly here.
Connected. So I've got to test each side of this coil.
So this is a transformer. It generates 20,000 volts. These are 20,000 volt capacitors. He's going to show you, we measured between both sides of the transformer. It totals 20,200 volts.
Ground. So we'll get half the voltage on this side and half the voltage on that side. And this is our ground probe. All right, power on. Lights go ahead and flicker every time. So we've got 10,500 volts on that one. All right, so we've got the other side hooked up. Go ahead and turn on the power. And we have 9,790 on this side. So it's a little bit lower. And just so you can see, I'm hooking up both neutral and hot to each probe. So we're getting the combined voltage of the entire coil. Supposed to be 30,000 volts per centimeter. We've got 8 1/4 inches here.
So I'm going to go ahead and stop it there. And if you want to watch it, I'll put the link down in the chat below. But here's what we basically did is we built a standalone test bed. We had all kinds of fragile equipment on the test bed, LED controllers, HVAC controllers, LED lights, and a bunch of other things. 8 feet away down at the other end of our mock-up, we had a panel and we had a dedicated ground rod, and we hooked the EMP shield to it. And we hit it over 100 times, this test bed, not 6 inches away from those components. We hit it repeatedly with the full voltage, which was an easy 400,000. But again, we published it the way we did because the keyboard warriors always want to come out and throw, shade on whatever sort of thing. And even though we hit beside the sensitive components, not inches away, the infinite attraction of this device pulled all of the electricity to it and put it out through that separate ground rod. When we disconnected the EMP, and it's in the video, by the way, that was in Steve's garage. As soon as he let it off, it coupled to his wiring in his home. It went through the sheetrock into the wall, traveled from one end of his home to the other, up a flight, and smoked every appliance in his kitchen. And because there was no protection, and a Marks generator is virtually identical to an EMP, by the way. So when you have 20,000 volt capacitors, when they hit 20,000 volts, they all go off simultaneously, which is exactly how an EMP functions. And it was pretty crazy. So September 1st, 1859 was the Carrington event. So we were hit with a CME, coronal mass ejection, which is a natural form of an EMP coming from plasma from the sun. Difference is that when we get hit with a CME, it hits the ionosphere and affects the entire world. So that Carrington level event set every telegraph wire on fire, every telegraph machine on fire. It even set telegraph operators on fire. It was a big deal. If we were to get hit with that today, that was called an X5. They go X1 through X10. If we got hit with an X5 today, it would fry every electronic device in the entire world unless it was hardened with something like this. And these guys make stuff that hardens substations, and our government hasn't done it. The DOD has, but the government hasn't done it. So that event on September 1st is 1859 is estimated to be somewhere just north of 900,000 volts. So we went on a mission to go to 1.2 million volts, and this is what happened. Steve didn't want to replace his appliances again, so we set the test bed up outdoors. We paired another 20 capacitors with our Marks generator, so that would be 800,000 volts. And Steve's a licensed electrician. The guy's a genius. 25 feet away with a fiberglass rod, he flicked the switch on the transformer. He was standing on a tractor tire that was 20 inches on its side, 20 inches high, and the 800,000 volts grounded through him and almost killed him at 25 feet away. I mean, so that was the end of our Marks generator stuff. And by that point in time, we'd spent $12,000 on equipment to build that. And so our next goal, we were going to do a 1.2 million volt Tesla power coil, but it would have added about another $20,000 on top of the $12,000 we spent. So we ran out of money for it. But nobody has tested these in the public like we have. Now, DOD's tested them. They have white papers, but you can go to empshield.com. We have a code, survival dispatch, all one word. You get $50 off each one, but they'll protect your vehicles, your home. And the keyboard warriors who say that's bullshit, it doesn't work, like, where's your video for your testing? Because we did it, and it's the real deal, to be quite frank. So moving on from there, the next one I've got to pull up here, just a second. All right. So this one here is basically a Senate report, infrastructure cybersecurity on the American electric grid. And here's your key components, which Mike started to discuss. So you've got power generation, you've got power storage, then you've got long distance transmission, then you've got substations, and then the substations lead to all the customers. So basically look at this from left to right. Okay. So in this case, you've got, wind turbines, you've got a power plant down here. You've got these, what are called step up substations. And so you're going 200 to 700,000 volts. And one of the weaknesses in our grid is that if one of these groups, Iran, Chinese, North Koreans, took off all the safety measures and jammed 200,000 volts, or pardon me, 700,000 volts down a 200,000 volt transmission line, they would fry the entire infrastructure from one end to the other in the blink of an eye. It would take, Lord knows how long it would take us to put that back together again, but it would be a really, really long time at the very least. And so next one up, and I'll go to both of you for questions on this one. So physical security, the electric grid's dirty little secret. So physical security requirements for the electric grid and their enforcement are largely non-existent 6 years after the Metcalf attack. So that was in 2013. It was in California. It was a PG&E transformer. So again, if I zoom in a little bit here, each of these transformers here is typically full of mineral oil. The mineral oil is cooling, as I mentioned earlier. It's 1/8-inch mild steel, so a regular AR-15 can penetrate it, no problem. The oil leaks out, they overheat, they melt down, poof, done and gone. When I got into this, and I'm going to let Mike and Khalid speak first, I couldn't believe the number of physical attacks that jive with that headline, this dirty little secret that nobody's talking about. And we know that we have Chinese individuals who've bought all kinds of land around power plants, substations, etc. So Khalid, you just had a power outage when we were talking the other night ago, and you've been subjected to attacks on your power grid. Maybe explain that a little bit, because those were physical kinetic attacks, right?
Physical kinetic attacks where they took out a transformer, one transformer, two transformers they took out, and they would completely black out a city. And once you blacked out the city, they were at your mercy. Because in a country like Pakistan, we are a third world country. So in a country like Pakistan, getting a generator, getting a transformer replaced can take anywhere from 3 days to 5 days to 7 days to 14 days, depending on if there's a transformer available or not. Not everyone has backup power. Not everyone has a battery. Not everyone has solar power. So not everyone has a generator. So you're at the mercy of the people. What happened, this was back in 2013. They shut down the power. When they shut down the power with a kinetic attack, they launched a terror attack behind it. Suicide bombers came in behind it. And the amount of mayhem that was caused because of that, because you couldn't call family members. You knew where the attack, anyone who had a TV that worked or an internet connection that worked because they were outside of that scope, they knew what had happened, but they couldn't contact anyone. So you had a family member in that shopping area or in that commercial area, and you had no idea what happened. All of a sudden, you were jumping into a car and trying to get yourself to that location. Absolute mayhem. Absolute mayhem. The problem we saw MI5 went through this exercise once. This was back in probably 2003, 2004. MI5 went through this exercise where they tried to figure out if their electric system could be physically attacked and how much damage it could do. And MI5 figured out that a series of 5 explosions would shut off all the power to London. And recovery was impossible. they literally said recovery would be impossible.
Yeah, it's incredible. So, Mike, as a Green Beret, you guys were trained in doing all sorts of, I don't know what you would call them, unusual attack vectors. What would it take physically to knock out an entire substation? What kind of resources would it take to just knock out a substation?
Yeah, terminal ballistic effects. I mean, there's many cases, some of them that I reported on from California to Southern Pines, North Carolina, where guys were just doing just what you just said. They weren't using AR-15s, they were using 308. But, you know, they're lobbing a 7.62 by 51 millimeter round, you know, at 2,700 plus feet per second is a sure, easy way to get it done. Like your article mentioned, none of these places, especially because a lot of the power grid, despite it having central control, is decentralized. My own hometown here in Heber City, Utah, runs off of a hydroelectric dam. There are no contingencies. I could walk to the water treatment plant and chuck a rock in it. It's completely exposed. Most of our water is exposed like that, and most of our electric is just sitting off the side of the road or the highway. And it typically is in a rural place where there is no security and infrastructure. And that's problematic because, again, everything is kind of tied into each other. So it's really easy to do a lot of damage. I have been through exercises with organizations that have looked at the red cell, you know, going up against these infrastructures as the adversary. I've written reports on it. I've done crisis action plans called CAPS across infrastructure and Northcom overseas in embassies, and it seems to all fall on deaf ears. Like I can't tell you how many times I've put together plans and said, like, hey, here's the vulnerabilities playing the red cell, and not seeing any changes done. And that's more or less the biggest issue that we run into in the country.
Well, I think it was before you came on, I mentioned for 30 years now, both parties have proposed hardening our power grids. The three we have, East, West Texas. And the last one was Donald Trump's first term. It was going to be like $5 billion to harden the power grid, and we've done absolutely nothing. So it's like you said, just falling on deaf ears. And just to back up a little bit further, Mike, when we were discussing the power grids before you joined us, Khalid painted a picture where you have these complex coordinated attacks happening. So in this particular case, the intel says 10 to 15 cities, culminating at the trauma centers. Once the words got out and everybody knows that we're under attack and we've been attacked, then it's really easy to start turning things off, like data networks and, you know, electrical grids, and throw people into a total state of panic at that particular point. So my question on that is, Mike, only what you can speak of, is this in our playbook? Like, if we use this against any adversaries where we've physically taken out their electrical grids to weaken them and make us stronger?
Yeah, it's as old as time. I mean, it's as old as the Trojan horse. Sabotage and subversion go after infrastructure. I'll give you a story. When I was in Afghanistan in 2005, I was in a remote fire base in Naray, Afghanistan, which is south of Barakout, north of Jalalabad and Asadabad, in a beautiful part of the country right off the Konar River. We were surrounded by high ground, parts of the Hindu Kush mountain range, beautiful. They would lob 107 millimeter rockets at us, and they would have a point of origin that was outside of the range of our best weapon systems, or at least our direct fire weapon systems. I've lobbed a lot of mortar rounds at these guys trying to chase them down. We found out from the intel, they weren't trying to kill us. I mean, that was a bonus. What they were going after with this, you know, 107 millimeter rocket is unique because it could be fired off a slab of rock with a battery. And it's self-stabilizing because it has the ability to self-stabilize front and aft, which means as long as you get a general line of sight and you can lob it, it will self-stabilize and you'll get the trajectory you need to impact. So a couple kilometers out, they could lob these things, and they weren't trying to hit our huts. They were trying to hit our generators because they knew if they hit our generators, they would knock out power. that would require logistical support. And then they would IED the logistical train up the only main supply route running north-south along the Konar River. And so they were playing the long game. And, the most rudimentary tactics utilized by the Taliban are our baseline. Now, I think it's something that bad guys always look to potentially target even before personnel, because once you disrupt that, you get a lot of second and third order effects that improve your tactical situation and allow you to produce more casualties, obviously.
That's really well said. Khalid, what's the current state of Afghanistan as far as their electrical grid? Just out of curiosity, because Mike, when was the last time you were in Afghanistan?
2011 I was in
Okay.
it was in northern Afghanistan in Mazar Sharif.
Okay, so I'm assuming things have changed in the past 14 years, Khalid. I'm just curious what the state of electricity is in Afghanistan.
Well, a lot of electricity exists. They've built a lot of hydropower dams now. India's invested a lot of money into Afghanistan to build hydropower dams. So that's where most of their power comes from. But if you think about a hydropower dam, I mean, one missile and it's gone, and your electrical system is gone. I mean, this is like Pakistan right now. India shut off water to us, and Pakistan's repeatedly threatened India that if you don't turn on the spigots again for us, we'll take it out. We'll take out that dam, and it'll flood a bunch of cities, and we'll get our electricity back. But the problem, when you look at the way these terrorists operate, they are looking for your weakest point. Wherever they can penetrate you at the easiest. Cyber attack, infrastructure attack, hitting your soft belly. When they play at that level, we're not even thinking about that. Mike is GWAT vet. We're used to picking up a weapon and fighting face to face. These guys are going for your underbelly. They're going for your weakest, your most simple attack opportunity, where it's going to cause the most mayhem. And once they cause that mayhem, they take advantage of that mayhem. You're literally flowing right into the gunfire then.
Yeah, that's crazy. But I hadn't heard it described as like second and third order effects until Mike just mentioned it, but that certainly makes a lot of sense. So I got a couple quick things to share, and then I got some more questions before we move on to the next phase. But this is the Department of Energy's website, and you can go here and do two things. You can submit a emergency incident report or disturbance report if you're you run a power station, you run a power grid, or you're a utility company. And the data goes back many, many years. So I went here and I pulled the data from 2010 till now and put it into this ginormous spreadsheet. So this first tab, this is just reports that were filed in 2010. And this one's 2011. And I'm not going to obviously show it. I'll be a heck of an eye test to be able to read this. I just want to give you an idea. And all the way through to 2023, the 2024 numbers haven't been released. And these 2023 numbers only actually go through August. So I took all of that. I took all of these tabs, 14 of them across the bottom that you see, merged them all together, and then parsed it for cyber attacks and physical attacks. And here's what the numbers came out at without picking out every last little thing. So in other words, there were more incidents than what I'm showing here because I went really safe. I basically said it has to say physical attack. And then I noticed afterwards in the many thousands of things, there were some that we didn't get because it wasn't described as a physical attack. It was described in another way. But check this out. 2010, 2 physical attacks, 2011, 5, then 3, 4, 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 7, 12, 14, 15, 10. Those are just confirmed physical attacks from, 2010 to 2023. So the numbers are a lot bigger than what people think they are. I'm not sure why there's just not a bunch of attention. Maybe, like Mike said, people, it seems to be falling on deaf ears, and I'm not sure why that is. But Mike, I'm curious what your thoughts are. If the feds aren't going to help secure our power grids, what role can state and local governments potentially play?
Yeah, I think that's the key, is the delineation between federal and state and local. That's the disparity, because federal DOE, I have many of my peer group work for the Department of Energy, and they've invested a lot in security, and so much so that it's pretty insane, their capabilities, which I won't even begin to discuss because I know a lot of that is classified. But those guys roll heavy, and if there's a potential attack in that arena, they're prepared. I know they are, from everything from surveillance and reconnaissance to cyber to, to running sensors. I mean, they use satellites to surveil the ground, looking for heat and signatures to potentially vector in on. But the issue is state and local governments. Like I just described, the hydroelectric dam in my own backyard is part of a recreation lake. I mean, where you could literally drive a boat to the edge of that water and there's no security because it's never happened before, but you could detonate anything you wanted to do. You could do an underground attack. You could throw whatever you wanted into the water. And so the vulnerability lies and the responsibility lies on state and local, because that's what's going to be disaffected. And again, those attacks that you mentioned in that survey, there are a lot of examples of this happening throughout the country. A couple months ago, and it might have been a couple weeks ago, but I believe it was a couple months ago, somebody sent me a report yesterday that I read from this, where at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, right outside the gate, likely in Southern Pines, I didn't see the particular town, but right outside the Delta Force compound, like right down the road, and it was Fort Liberty. It's back to what it should be, is Fort Bragg. At Fort Bragg, a special operations officer who was living in his home noticed some activity. He interdicted one of these guys that was on his property and winded up engaging this guy. And turns out this dude was from Chechnya and had some ties to a militia organization. And he had another partner that was in a vehicle down the road who was also from Chechnya. And so it looks like, at least on the surface, two Chechen dudes were probing this special operations officer, and they messed with the wrong dude. He might have been a troop commander in Delta. He might have been a squadron commander, or he might have been a team leader in special forces. But these type of things are happening routinely. I lived in Lillington, North Carolina, and when I was in the SIF company, the crisis, it's now called the Crisis Response Force, the CRIF. When I worked there, our compound was outside of the gate. In Delta, the Delta compound's outside of the gate. I never had to go on base. The amount of shenanigans that Southern Pines Police Department, that county, Fayetteville Police Department run into with all the things going on where people are probing, doing passive reconnaissance, all the craziness is happening all over the country. It's not often reported and never consolidated. That information is never consolidated and talked about. I think one of the most impactful things we could do is do things that you're doing, is like bringing this information together to get an understanding of what the potential threat is. And it's present. I mean, it's happening every single day in this country. It's just not talked about.
Yeah.
So what Mike is basically saying is that I'm like a data geek.
Dude, that stuff, that merging and using AI and merging this technology into these statistics and getting a bigger picture, a broader picture, that's what the government should be doing. And they're not doing it. At least sub it out to guys like you, guys like Khalid. At least sub it so we start doing these reports so we get an understanding of what's happening, likely in our own backyard.
So I think I've got one more article actually on Grid Down, but I just want to stitch this together before we go any further for our audience. You heard it straight from Mike, former Green Beret, former CIA GRS as well, that when we're facing these attacks, these complex coordinated attacks, this is another vulnerability that's easy for them to exploit. So a lot of what we've been seeing for grid down situations are actually initiated by these hacking attempts, these cyber attacks, plus kinetic, meaning physical, just to see what the reaction is. Can we get them back up and running? How long does it take to get them back up and running? What's the SOP look like for the, utility company or otherwise to bring them back online? It's all information gathering, which Khalid has been alluding to for quite some time. So let me pull up the next one here. And this will be it. And we'll be moving on to the third and last topic for tonight. So 3 alarming threats to the U.S. energy grid: cyber, physical, and existential events. Protecting critical infrastructure, especially the U.S. energy grid, is certainly a topic that keeps the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, U.S. Department of Energy, U.S. Department of Defense, and U.S. intelligence community planners up at night. The threats can be from cybersecurity attacks by countries, criminal gangs, or hacktivists, from physical attacks by terrorists, domestic or foreign, and vandals on utilities or power plants, or from an electromagnetic pulse generated from geomagnetic solar flare, which is a CME, or from a terrorist short-range missile exploded in the atmosphere. The underlying reality is that from an energy frequency perspective, the aging U.S. energy grid infrastructure is extremely vulnerable to cyber attacks, physical incidents, and existential threats. So the only reason I put that up is I just wanted to drive it home that this is a serious vulnerability. So Mike, I'll go to you first and then Khalid. So if the feds aren't doing this, and like you said, Mike, state and local should get involved. Whether they do that, that remains to be seen, which puts it on each of us then. So what are your recommendations for the average homeowner, small budget to big budget, of how they can mitigate this and have energy at their disposal if and when the grid goes down for an extended period?
Yeah, great question to close it out is what do we do about it? And how I look at it, the analogy I use is cut the umbilical cord, because the umbilical cord you have is a false sense of security that is going to disappoint you in the worst case scenario. What I mean is, like, your dependence on the infrastructure, when it collapses, that you have no say in how it's protected. Imagine the city councilman that you voted for based on his name. His name sounded cooler than the next guy. Like, you don't know who these people are. They're just rando people who are just stepping up, good, bad, indifferent, malice, who knows, but they're not going to get ahead of this and think about security and infrastructure. So one of the things that we always recommend is having a generator. The world operates off generators. When I was where Khalid is in Pakistan, I saw that when I went through this huge, massive earthquake. I've only been in 2 earthquakes in my life. One was in Afghanistan that originated in Pakistan, and the other was in Pakistan that originated in Afghanistan. And they were mega earthquakes. I believe this one was 2015 time period, 2015 or 2016. But it devastated that entire region. It was more into hinterlands of Pakistan, but it still affected Islamabad, where I was at. Everybody was operating off of generators. We don't typically see that in the country unless you're camping, you're doing an overland trip with your family, or you have an off-grid kind of setup. A 17 kilowatt Generac generator hooked to natural gas is the best setup. One, because natural gas you could set up in a standalone tank. You could do 500 gallons, which would power your house intermittently, meaning focused on like the fridge, the main room, things that you need in utility for about a month. And it's separate from the system. That's the key. Have it standalone, have it separate, and have it independent. Don't rent the propane tank from a company that's going to go and pull it off your property in that worst case scenario. Buy a standalone one, fill it up, and then the 17 kilowatt that I had in Arizona, I had it in Prescott. Every time it snowed, which it did snow in that part of the Arizona, it would shut down the power across the entire area. Every single person in my neighborhood would lose power, and they would be elderly. I had power the entire time, and it automatically switched over. At a minimum, 17 kilowatts is the recommendation. That's the higher end. It's running 10 to 20 grand, depending on your setup. At the low end, I would say have things like Starbat. I work with Starbat. It's a lithium battery that plugs into, you could trickle charge it with solar power, but you could power electronics. You could power your Starlink satellite. So you have some ability to communicate. It powers your cell phone, so you can send out those texts that you need to send out. But have some portable devices like Jackery, Starbat, what is the Go, whatever it is, the Goal Zero setups. because you're going to need residual power to plug into devices to be able to just communicate when stuff hits the fan. There's a baseline of recommendations, but the general idea is think outside the box and think not depending on the system, and cut the umbilical cord as soon as you can.
So I wasn't trying to interrupt. I wanted to give you kudos at one point there when you mentioned natural gas in a tank on your property that you own. So coming from high tech, I've seen multiple data centers that are hooked into natural gas lines from the city. And when the power outage goes out, like when there was a fire at a substation in Long Island, 2002, 2003 timeframe, it took out the entire Northeast. It was a cascading failure of the grid. Our customers there who had data centers full of our equipment that were on natural gas didn't make it through because the gas wasn't coming through at a high enough pressure to feed the generators. So just that was a great observation on your part, Mike. For homeowners, you know, the same thing I tell people, depending on your budget, get a propane generator that you can at least hook up the barbecue tanks to. And if you have enough battery, it works out pretty good. This is Hurricane Central, you know, like a mouse walks by a telephone pole here and farts and we lose our electricity. It's crazy, you know, but point being is that when you buy gas, like pump gas, every 3 months, you got to rotate it. You've got to stabilize it. You've got to octane boost it. Gas generators are not decent for any type of long-term use. Let me just put it that way. The propane ones are very efficient because you can stack the tanks up and they never go bad. But also, if you have enough battery, like Mike was saying, whether it's, you know, Jackery or whoever, we've got a bunch of units from Mango Power E, and we've got about 20,000 kilowatts of, I could do the math in my head, 20 kW for battery. So what we do is we run the propane generators for an hour, hour and a half in the morning, hour and a half at night. We don't have them running the rest of the day, and we can power most of our home, especially, you know, the critical stuff like Mike mentioned. So that's decent for homeowners. But if you can't afford to go all the way like that, Mike's suggestions are great. Khalid, do you want to add anything to recommendations for people to be protected when the grid goes down?
Because we live in a country where, you know, power goes out when it rains, when it snows, when there's an earthquake. We all have different types of systems. My entire house is on solar. It's completely wired up for solar. I don't have an electricity meter on my house because I've converted my entire house to solar. I buy propane tanks. I connect those to the generator. So when the solar fails, I've got my own generators that run. We were talking about this the other day when our power went out. That we have so many fail safes here because we've seen everything. When we were living in Karachi, there was a monsoon rain that set the substation on fire. Monsoon rain flooded the substation, set it on fire. We didn't have electricity for 4 days. And can you just imagine living for 4 days without electricity? That's where we had the generator kick in. That's where we had natural gas kick in. We weren't worried about it then. So, I mean, these fail safes, because of the country we live in, we've learned to build them.
When Hurricane Charlie hit us in 2005, it was a Cat 5 in Tampa. Then it shot straight down I-4 and spanked us here. It was a very strong Cat 4. We had no power for 3 weeks. South of us in New Smyrna Beach went 3 months without power. And that sucks. But I'll tell you what sucks even more is having no power and having no water. We had a water main and a sewer main burst beside each other during Hurricane Matthew, and it just affected our little town. But I had meetings to go to on a regular basis. We had no water for 3 weeks. How do you flush the commode? How do you have a shower? It's an issue. Like it's a serious issue to deal with, and it's not a fun, serious issue to deal with. A couple quick things I want to add before we move on to massive protests and how they're being used by terrorists. That year that Charlie hit us, we had a rash of generator thefts. So before the hurricane getting to us, people go nuts, right? They go to Home Depot, Lowe's, they buy whatever they can for generators. Everything's very reactionary for most people. Well, because Charlie hit us so hard way back when, what was happening is that people would buy used lawnmowers for $20-25 off of Craigslist. They would come in the middle of the night outside your home, fire up the gas lawnmower, turn your generator off and walk away with it. And people would wake up and go, Oh, yeah, I can still hear the generator running. Then they get up in the morning and the generator's gone and there's a shitty lawnmower left in its place. So why do I mention that? Don't do this. I'm not recommending that you do this, but I'm telling you straight up, we run our propane generators in our mudroom, and I've run carbon monoxide detectors in there, and it's never reached anything that's even close to being harmful. It's closed off from the rest of the house. I'm not telling you to do this, but think in terms of construction. How many times have you seen somebody with a propane heater on a construction site that's blowing a flame out like a jet engine? It's the same thing. It's the exact same stuff that comes off it. So, don't do as I say, as they say. don't follow Chris Evans' example. But I'm just mentioning it for posterity's sake. So let's move on to the next one here, the next bucket of stories. And I've just got to get it up on stage here for us. 2 seconds here. Did I ever mention we sure could use a producer? Anyway, so we're going to pivot here. We've basically covered all the bases on power grids and how terrorist groups are wise to it. They have access over the network. They have physical access, and it's like an Achilles heel force that can take us down. And when we see a lot of the power grid outages that are caused by cyber attacks or terrorists, basically it's called penetration testing. They're pen testing our systems and all the other stuff I already mentioned. So let's move into this one here, because now things start to get interesting. All of us who are, conservative libertarians, constitutional libertarians, whatever you want to call it, are well aware of George Soros and, the damage that he's done to our country, funding various things. But it's actually more nefarious than that. It's significantly more nefarious. And Khalid and Mike both know way more about this than I do, but left-wing dark money mega donors, including George Soros, contribute $20 million to groups funding protests against Trump's DC crime crackdown. This was yesterday. We could go back, and I've got other articles, but this has been going on a long time. Several lefty dark money organizations, including George Soros, contributed more than $20 million to groups funding protests against President Donald Trump's crime crackdown in Washington, D.C. Free DC, a fiscally sponsored special project of progressive nonprofits, Community Change and Community Change Action, brought 150 protesters near the White House, Monday to protest Trump's plan to deploy National Guard troops in the district and federalize the city's police department. Do not obey in advance and take up space are among Free DC's guiding principles, and the group urges supporters to go outside at 8 p.m. and bang pots and pans, sing, chant, or make noise for 5 minutes every night of the occupation. And there's a long, long list of these guys, and Khalid was the first one to clue me into this, that when this dark money pays for this stuff, they're precisely looking for, how does law enforcement react? What are the law enforcement SOPs? How long does it even take to get there when you have this spontaneous, peaceful protest come out of nowhere? And then it actually goes another step further. Mike, you posted on X today your theory on why National Guard's being deployed to DC, and it looks like Trump's going to do it to all the major Democrat cities that have turned to shit. What was your comment that you made today with regards to the National Guard being deployed for other reasons that aren't being publicized?
Yeah, when I lived in DC, and Southeast DC is probably one of the worst places I've ever been to in America, and the frequency of violence is extreme. I think DC now is over 100 homicides in just that small area. But I'm curious to the speed in which things were executed, and seeing guys, from the FBI, ATF, whatever federal organization doing presence patrols at night makes me think that this is more than just a crackdown on crime. I mean, the guy who got beat up from Doge,
Big balls,
supposedly was the trigger. But if I am in charge of security, somebody mentioned it to me in a comment on that post where they said, it was on my Patreon, they said, well, if this potentially would have happened, wouldn't Department of Homeland Security put out a threat assessment and said, hey, threat has increased? Because my theory is that the federal government is preparing for potentially an imminent terrorist attack in Washington, D.C. What better way in disguise do you both tamper fear mongering because everybody's going to lose it when you say, remember right after 9/11 where we had the different color schemes for a potential attack. Dude, I remember going into the base, and if it was like an elevated attack, I'm like hyper vigilant because it's like, hey man, did you hear that whatever it was, red, amber, green, or something like that? Well, that's exactly what would happen if DHS came out and said, we have intel that there's a potential imminent attack about to happen. It's one of the reasons we talk about it in the background, but I think the main effort doesn't discuss it at all because, one, they don't want to tip a hat potentially. Two, they don't want everybody to panic and to have mass fear, which would cause a whole bunch of geopolitical issues across the board. But I think it's a prospect. If I was in charge and I wanted to increase security, I could use many excuses to get more federal agents in the field doing investigations and potentially stopping a terrorist attack, and then go, haha, we were stopping crime. That was our reason. That was our access and placement. But we just happened to stop a terrorist attack while doing that. And I think it would be the perfect strategy. And it's like, if anybody says like, well, that seems like there are people who are like, that seems way out there. And I'm like, based on everything that's happening in our country and everything that's going on, I think that's the least of the potential courses of action that are extreme.
Yeah, I don't disagree. Khalid, do you want to pick up there with your thoughts?
Yeah, if you look at Los Angeles, when the ICE riots were happening in Los Angeles, I mean, you had paid protesters that were getting paid $500 a day, $5,000 a day just to come out and raise hell. What we're looking at right now, and this is something we were watching really closely, when Trump decided to federalize the DC, he turned around and he made a very interesting statement. He said, Detroit, New York, Chicago, any major city where there is a crime problem, we are going to federalize the police. Today, Tom Homan issued a statement saying that DC is now no longer a sanctuary city. Now, when you watch the role, Mike's statement, I saw Mike's X comment. I saw him post it on X. I was like, yeah, that's a pretty good idea. It's great cover that you roll out the National Guard, you roll out the DEA, you roll out the FBI, you roll out DHS, you roll out ICE, and you're actually doing something else. But the cover is, crime has gotten so high. What would make a lot of sense right now is if they were to sweep up a lot of terrorists. And I'm not talking cartels. Cartels, I'm really, Sarah mentioned this as well, that, you were talking about, we arrested 600 terrorists in the last month. Well, you arrested 600 cartel members. You didn't arrest 600 Al-Qaeda members. You need to start breaking that up, that these are cartel members, these are actual terrorists. Because until we know that you have made national security more of a focus, it's going to put a lot of people off because they're hearing all of these statements. They're hearing all these threats. They're hearing Iran is going to try and kill the president. The other day, Telegram, where they were actually planning out attacks on how to take out the president. One kid, 17-year-old kid, killed his parents and his stepfather. Mother and stepfather got on the road and drove to a location where Donald Trump was holding a rally with the intent of assassinating him. And it was all orchestrated by Ukrainians on that Telegram network.
Khalid, was it Telegram or Terrorgram? Because there's both of them out there.
Telegram was the platform being used.
Okay.
But the network was called Telegram. And you had every country in the world involved. Every country was involved. You had Ukrainians paying Americans to carry out assassinations. You had French people being paid to carry out attacks on the power grid. Just the sheer level of that network. When you look at that and go, this is going on behind the scenes. Everything we've been talking about for the past, 5, 6, 7 days, it's all going on, but nobody's talking about it. Yeah, and the people that bring it up are going, whoa, wait a minute, that's, fear mongering. It's not fear mongering, it's happening. You're just not listening to it.
Yeah, they're stuck in that September 10th type of mindset. So a couple quick things. a couple infographics that we posted earlier today. So I don't know if you guys caught this, but Trump is also saying he's going to create a National Guard QRF, quick reaction force, somewhere around 600 people, troops that can be deployed in the blink of an eye anywhere in the country if there's some sort of emergency, whether it be civil unrest, terrorist attack, whatever the case may be. So I thought that was interesting timing as well. And then I posted this infographic, pardon me, on X as well, just to say there, all these things we're discussing, power grids, sudden flash mobs, it's not, they're not all coincidences. They're calculated reconnaissance missions by our foreign adversaries, and foreign adversaries working with terror sleeper cells, basically mapping our response time, studying our SOPs, probing our weak spots. And the feds aren't saying anything. The legacy media is not saying anything. And we're going to be caught with our pants down in this whole thing. By the way, I'm going to be sending a bunch of files up to our Substack. So this video will go away when we wrap up here. But this top article here today, SITREP, when you go into it, at the very end, I'm going to upload a bunch of documents that I've shown you guys. And that's stuff that we've created ourselves, our own spreadsheets. We've got some maps. We've got a bunch of PDFs that are going to go up there as well. So moving on to the next one, as far as these, spontaneous groups, this is where it gets even worse. Federal agencies allocate millions to activist groups with protest ties. And this is, February of 2025 here. Federal agencies, including the State Department and USAID, which thank God is done, have awarded over $27 million to left-wing organization under the Tides Foundation and Tides Center, which also provide legal support to protesters in the U.S. These grants, spanning multiple administrations, were intended for humanitarian efforts and civil society support, but have drawn criticism for indirectly funding groups involved in anti-police and anti-Israel activism. Investigators argue that such funding effectively aids movements opposing U.S. law enforcement and foreign policy, prompting scrutiny from conservative politicians and watchdog groups. Despite former President Trump, current President Trump, efforts to cut foreign aid and shut down USAID, the funds continue to be distributed, with a significant portion allocated during his first administration. Some Tides affiliate groups have supported protests under federal investigation, Antifa, Black Lives Matter, so on and so forth. So essentially what that's describing is not only are we being subject to these, call them trial runs, the probes as Khalid calls them, but we're paying for it.
Yeah.
Mike, you got anything to say about the insanity? It's almost like we pay for the aid in Gaza and we pay for the munitions for Israel to blow up Gaza. Like they're taking money out of one pocket and out of the other pocket at the same time.
Yeah, it's pretty. I mean, it's pretty insane that I thought about this with P. Diddy. P. Diddy got caught up for racketeering as a federal charge, and to charge somebody with racketeering, it's pretty easy. You basically have to have a syndicate. I mean, you have to have an underground syndicate. When you look at George Soros and how many times his name has been dropped for providing financial aid, he would be on the top of a target deck of HVTs as a financier, because that's what you want to cut the head off of. And he's still giving money through his son. And, you still hearing about it in recent riots and protests, let alone, all the evidence and proof from the BLM and Antifa protests, which were completely a fraud, by the way. I mean, the person in charge of BLM at the time was using it on mansions, and then writing it off. And I was skeptical right out the gate. I think a lot of this comes down to the money. And if the DOJ does what it says it's going to do and goes after this corruption, then the focus is not going to be American citizens who failed to claim a couple $100 on their IRS paperwork, right? The focus isn't going to be 37,000 additional IRS agents to go after American citizens, but go after the power players who are using money to execute their own advocacy, their political activism. And so I hope, that more people are called out for this. And it's a shame that, the Epstein files kind of fell flat. And I could already see that the legacy, at least the corporate media, has moved on from that. and we might not ever know. We'll know 50 years from now when it's unredacted and it's released. But I'm a little bit optimistic that these kind of people who are using money to fund their own terrorism essentially are going to be rolled up.
Yeah,
we can only hope. Khalid, do you want to add to that before we move on?
Yeah, the Soros it's domestic terrorism. I mean, there's no other way to describe it. It's domestic terrorism. And as long as Soros is allowed to operate, you're pouring fuel on the fire. He's just looking for a place to spend money and create problems for the Republicans, for the conservatives. He doesn't care. He just wants to create problems.
Well, a question for you, Khalid. How do these federally funded protests, how do they cooperate or work with our enemies, both the ones who are already here, but also the ones overseas?
Well, look at it this way. You don't know where the funds are coming from. I mean, you can identify George Soros, you can identify an NGO that's been created, but you don't know who's behind that NGO. You don't know who the members of that NGO are, and you don't know what their real mission is. I can say I've created an NGO to feed poor people, but that's the picture I've given you to get the money out of you. What I do with those funds is up to me. I mean, look at the California fires. They did that big rock concert. $100 million came in. Where'd the money go? $50 million went to Gavin Newsom's wife, to her NGO. Just explain that to me. Not one person that was affected by the fires received $1. So the cover has been beautifully made. I mean, you literally have to restructure the entire funding system. How do you create an NGO? What's required for an NGO? How is that NGO checked? When funding is given, how do we check how that money's been spent? Whether it's spent in Afghanistan, whether it's spent in Syria, whether it's spent in Iraq, whether it's spent in Los Angeles, Seattle, or anywhere else. We need to know where that money went.
So when he was talking about all this, Mike, I thought to myself, Khalid Clinton kind of has a ring to it, you know. Essentially describing the Clinton Foundation. So go ahead and pull the next one up here. I'm going to go through the next stuff that we have. I think we got half a dozen. I'm going to go through them relatively quickly, but inside America's protest machine, who's funding the chaos? A spreadsheet circulated on X shared by Data Republican on June 13, 2025 appears to expose a coordinated network of activist groups orchestrating monthly protests across the United States, including the recent Tesla takedown on February 15, 2025. The document identifies multiple organizations, reportedly 22 in total, according to the original post, including Churla, which allegedly received $34 million in grants, and progressive advocacy arms like Vote Save America. The coordination suggests these demonstrations are far from spontaneous grassroots activism, and they're not. There's nothing grassroots about this. There's nothing spontaneously popping up. These are funded exercises for multiple purposes that Mike and Khalid have already covered, as well as this is being used to probe what our responses are to all of this stuff. So this cracked me up here. Check this out. Crowdsondemand.com. This is how bold these guys are. So they actually have a page up top here that says, you know, how do you become a paid activist? So activism for hire, how to land a paid protesting job. In today's dynamic socio-political landscape, activism takes various forms, including protest rallies and demonstrations. However, as societal dynamics evolve, so too does the nature of activism. Increasingly, as it transformed into a professional pursuit, for some offering paid opportunities to advocate for change. This shift has ignited both curiosity and controversy, prompting individuals to delve into the intricacy of paid protesting jobs. Let's take a closer look. The rise of paid activism. With the rise of digital communication, social media, activism has become more visible and accessible than ever. This goes on to basically describe if you have a cause and you want to do what's called astroturfing and make it look like it's a completely organic uprising that just popped up out of nowhere, you go to these guys, Crowds on Demand. You pay them the money. They pay people to go protest. Poof. There you go. There's your instant protest. There's absolutely nothing organic to it whatsoever. I'm going to take the balance of these. So these are documents I created myself that basically dive into all of these different groups where you can pay them to create protests for you. There's several PDFs. If you go to survivaldispatch.news, Go into that first article. I'm going to upload them all to the bottom of that post. You can sign up for a free account. You get our daily sit reps and Saturday watch guides. If you want to sign up as a paying member, that's great. It's only $7.99 a month or $75 a year. Get 2.5 months for free that way. But you also get our SDEN system. You get enrolled in the Survival Dispatch Emergency Notification System. You get an invite to our super crazy busy Signal chat. How busy is it, Khalid?
Oh
do
my God.
do you do the same thing as me and I can't read all this?
Yep. Mark all is red. Yep. I've done that a couple times.
The amount of traffic and intel shared there is phenomenal. So if you sign up as a Guardian and you have Signal on your phone, you just send your email address to support@survivaldispatch.com. We get you in there. You get early access to our instructional videos from JJ Morris. You get all of the sources for our sit reps. Free, you get the sit rep. Paying gets all the sources as well. And you get all 37 episodes, or I should say issues, of Survival Dispatch Insider magazine that sell for $10 a piece normally. So Khalid, this PDF here is 20 pages long. I'm going to upload it as well. But this is a study that was done on predicting terrorist attacks using localized news data. And you were the first one who looked at it and said, yeah, that's directly applicable to this pop-up protest stuff. Can you explain what their findings were essentially, Khalid?
Well, look, this is what we've been doing. This is the mentality we've been using for decades now. Because when you look at how a terrorist attack happens in any country, there's always some kind of trigger. There's always some kind of event that happens beforehand, and those events capitalize on top of each other. They capitalize on top of each other. They capitalize on top of each other, and then you have the terror attack. And what we've seen in the U.S., I mean, since 1st January 2025, I won't even go back to 2023. When you look at from 2025 and you start rolling through every single thing that's been reported in the news and go, wait a minute, there's been a lot of incidents this year. Blasts, there have been threats on airplanes, there have been attacks at schools. There's been a lot of things that have happened this year. This can't be organic. This can't be just coincidence. And in the intelligence world, we don't believe there's anything called coincidence. There's a meaning behind everything that happens. There's no such thing as coincidence when it comes to intelligence. So we're always digging in. The reason that when people, like when we talk to people, we say, look, take everything you see in your neighborhood and then go back a year and see if those same things were happening a year ago. And then you'll figure out that there's something wrong in your neighborhood. Then start monitoring, start watching. What these guys did in their report was beautifully done. They explained exactly what the mentality we use for trying to identify cities, predicting the attack, where the flow becomes very heavy, where you are testing SOPs at a regular basis. 3-4 things happen in a week, 3-4 things happen in a month. It gives you a picture, okay, this is the area. Then you look, okay, how many people live in this region? If you spread out 20 kilometers, how many people live in that area? And you start to develop a zone of what could be. Like you look at Chicago, Chicago, Illinois, no, police level's too high. It may not happen in Chicago. But if you roll a little bit over, and then there's South Bend, Indiana, or Elkhart, Indiana. You've got no police force there, nice small town, and you can carry out all kinds of attacks. So what they did in this report is they went through that methodology that we use at Command 11, that look at what's reported in the news, dig into it, figure out what the mentality behind it is, and see how it relates. Because there are no coincidences. That's one thing everyone has to understand. There is no such thing as a coincidence. There is a driving factor behind everything. Whether it be a terrorist, whether it be a lunatic, whatever it may be, there's something behind it.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Khalid. Mike, do you want to add anything to Khalid's thoughts on that?
No, he expanded on it really well. Like that's exactly what I was thinking as well.
Okay, so I want to show you something. I don't think I've shared this with you, Mike. Khalid's seen it. So we took a list of suspicious activities that were sent to us by a girl on X, Amanda from Texas. That's all I'll say. And we put it into a spreadsheet. Then I converted it to an interactive map. And then a bunch of people who are our followers, like the professor and Roger Moore, that are in that Signal chat, they did all the legwork and they dug up links to verify that all of these things have happened. So I know it's a bit of an eye test here, but over on this side, there's a legend: arrests, airports, malls, schools, grocery. Okay. So you can pick something like this and click on it. Bartlesville cyber attack, 050125, district cyber attack. It's got the address of where it was, terrorist exploitation testing, digital vulnerabilities. Click the news link. It opens up news to it on the other side. There are 111 of these very fishy things. Now, we can't confirm what bomb threats were kids, being kids acting like assholes versus terrorists actually, calling them in to test SOPs and response times. But I'm going to put this in that Substack post as well, survivaldispatch.news. And you're welcome to download this as well and play with it. There's a shit ton of information in this map. Khalid and I took it, actually, we overlaid it on his data, and we were able to identify those 10 to 15 cities, those tier twos, they're saying are highly likely to be attacked. Jives very nicely with a good chunk of this data. So like Buffalo, New York is one of those cities. Denver, Colorado is one of those cities that, tier 2 city, one level 1 trauma center. Anyway, moving on from there, we're right at the end. This was supported by Dale. So speaking of Dale, so Dale is this prolific poster in our private signal chat. The guy's up at the crack of dawn. He bombs us with all this awesome news and everything. I don't know if either of you had a chance to look at this, but this is truly reveals that we live in bizarro world. You ready for this?
Yeah.
The Toronto International Film Festival has pulled an October 7th documentary over alleged Hamas copyright claims. TIFF removed The Road Between Us, The Ultimate Rescue, which tells the story of Noam T-Bon, who saved his 2 granddaughters while surrounded by Hamas terrorists at the Nova Music Festival. The festival claimed the film used Nur Oz massacre footage owned by Hamas, and that the filmmakers lacked legal clearance to use the images Hamas itself posted on October the 7th. The real reason, however, may not have been legal risk at all, but rather a desire to avoid Free Palestine protests. By granting Hamas legal legitimacy and silencing the truth of October 7th, TIFF chose cowardice. Despicable. Holy crap. Mike, did you catch that before tonight, or is this new news to you?
That's new to me, but it doesn't surprise me at all. I mean, the radicals appeasing terrorists is I mean, again, it's as old as time. It's like they're always going to have these sympathizers, these empathizers that facilitate their success. And that's one way to facilitate their success, by not getting the message out there of the truth of what actually happened. Nobody, I always caveat this by saying I'm not Jewish. I have no skin in the game, but I've killed and captured terrorists for a career, for a profession.
Yeah.
I know the difference between evil and good, and Hamas is evil, and nobody wants to see the reality of those things. Greta Thunberg, if you show her the images of what Hamas actually did on October 7th, she wouldn't see it. She didn't want to watch it. She refused to watch it. So you want to know the truth when it's selective. That's not the truth. The truth is total and wholehearted, and that's a problem with this. Is when they showed the parking lot that was bombed by Israel and said it was a hospital that was targeted and that there are hundreds of bodies. And then the news the next day on BBC reported, and then it disseminated all across American national media, an empty parking lot with a couple cars that were burned out, and the building literally intact with people walking into it with no explanation, and just saying, hey, the Ministry of Media from Hamas had reported this. No, that's not the ministry. That's like saying the Ministry of Al-Qaeda media operations, Inspire, put out a factual report in their magazine. It's like, that's propaganda. I mean, that's false information. It doesn't surprise me.
No, it's absolutely insane. So, as we reported when you first joined us, Mike, that there's been an active shooter situation going on in Virginia. A little bit more information on that now. It looks like 4 officers were shot. A couple of them are in pretty bad shape. They had to be medevaced out. And I just caught a comment in the chat section down there saying, where was it again? There we go. Very serious stuff going on. Police being shot at and hit in New York, Los Angeles, all the protesting that's going on, all the Muslim Brotherhood cities that are being built. So I haven't had a chance to verify that because obviously we're in the middle of the broadcast, but it looks like for sure we've had an active shooter situation. They're saying the guy in Pennsylvania is a former Marine and he's holed up in his house now, and they have not got control of him just yet, and that 4 officers shot. And we'll have some news, after the broadcast if there's stuff going on in New York and California. Not that I don't believe it, but we haven't been able to verify it. So we're at the end here. We've got our conflicted question tonight, conflictedthegame.com. Your hunting party has been captured by an unknown number of well-armed men and is being held in a well-fortified location. The armed men offer to return your hunting party for half of your food supply. Would you take their offer and avoid losing members of your group, or would you fight and risk everything? How would you handle this situation? Mike, I got to go to you first.
Yeah, I would give them half the rations, track their bed down location, and then kill them all. I mean, it's pretty simple. Yeah. Like you never show your cards, never fight till the death. There's always a flank and maneuver tactic, and I would always negotiate, play nice, and then I would live to fight another day and take advantage of the opportunity at a later time.
Yeah, so Khalid and I don't need to answer the question because that is the
Mike got that one right.
Yeah, that's awesome, Mike. You're brilliant. All right, so that's it for tonight. Let me see what else have we got here quickly. We'll be back tomorrow night, of course, usual time, 7 p.m. Eastern, and it'll be the next installment on our series of Road to 9/11 2.0, and we're going to be specifically looking at priority kill zones, schools, churches, and retail. I want to thank Mike for your time. Really, really appreciate it. Mike has a young family. Giving up time is very much appreciated, Mike. Thank you. And Khalid as well. I think Khalid doesn't sleep because he's on the other side of the world and he's always available. And if I text him on Signal, he always responds. I'm like, holy crap, this guy, he's like Donald Trump 2.0. He sleeps like 2 hours a day or something.
Yeah.
Crazy. Yeah. I kid you not.
I mean, we've got too much going on around us. We've got operations going on. We've got our own teams running, and we don't get time to rest. So, I mean, it's just run. We'll sleep when we're dead.
So I want to, it's hilarious. I want to mention before we leave that Mike did a killer video that Carnivalt was one of a number of different foods in it. And he had some great comments on sodium and whatnot. But Mike, which YouTube channel is that on again? Is it the Mike Force podcast?
Yeah, I have several, but it's on Mike Glover channel. So it's at Mike Glover channel on the tag.
Yeah, okay, at Mike Glover channel. So go check it out. I mean, he was very call it neutral. He scored peak at the top for taste, for example, and there were a whole bunch of different criteria. I actually think that Mike has been moonlighting as one of these TV celebrity cooks because he did a great job of it. It's an awesome video, and I'm sure there's a time and a place for every product that he looked at, but he decided that Carnival's pretty good stuff. So hey, go to carnivalt.com, code EATMEAT, get 10% off. Other than that, Cleet, again, appreciate your time. Mike can't say thank you enough. We'll be back tomorrow night. Between now and then, please like, share, comment, subscribe. God bless America.
God bless
and enjoy
America.
the closing video.
Adam cries like a baby, other Adam that could. This treason is stone you created, in the guts we always knew. Could betray.
Despite him, well, there's no real evidence of that.
Could treasonous could.
The Russians offered help, which we know they did. The campaign accepted help, which we know they did.
They spied on my campaign, they got caught.
No.
And then they went much further than that, and they got caught.
There's no escape. Your deranged Trump hating
Trump will not be president.
has returned, stabbed you like knife.
Why aren't I 50 points ahead, you might ask?
Attacking our president with a Russian hoax and millions of slanderous lies.
Infamous dossier on Trump.
I act so surprised at your criminal demise as we expose every receipt, every secret you kept as you undermine. Now we're coming for every one of you. It's time for you to pay the price.